All right. So thank you everyone for joining us. We are so thrilled to be hosting our first Canndora Connect focused on the psychedelic industry. Today's event was made possible by our presenting partners, Red Light Holland and Wake. So thank you very much to both of you. Canndora and Canndora Connect are media and event platforms created by Marigold PR with the goal of building profile for women in emerging industries. We are also the team behind the Women Wellness and Cannabis Conference, which is entering its second year in May. So look forward to May 26, 2021. Lots to come there. We can't wait. Over the past few years, we're really proud to say that Canndora and WWC have provided speaking and thought leadership opportunities for over 100 women. And we've had more than 2,000 global attendees that have told us they really value the networking leading to business and career opportunities. We have 8 innovative speakers today, and there'll be lots to learn. I've got my notes ready. I'll be taking lots of notes. And our speakers will be introducing themselves and their companies during our 2 40-minute panels. There will be time for questions during the Q&A. And so there's a Q&A function within Zoom. And so that's probably the best place to go. You can also put them in the chat. We'll be looking at that as well. And our agenda today is as follows. So first up, we have a panel focused on the international psychedelic market. So we're really excited to learn about all of the business opportunities and how it's emerging across the globe from our speakers. Next, we have a panel focused on the science behind psilocybin and the opportunities for women specifically. I'm personally also very excited about this panel. Following the panels, we'll break out into rotating networking groups. So kind of think speed dating, but networking. And everyone will get a chance there to engage and profile their business and collaboration needs. We had over 100 people RSVP, so that's awesome. We'd really like to thank a few people, including the media attending today. We'd also like to thank our media partners that include Cannabis Prospect, Psychedelic Newswire, PsyIndex, and CFN Media. And another big thank you to our speakers, our community partners, and our presenting partners, Wake and Red Light Holland. We're ready to get started. So over to you, Danielle, to get our first panel going.
Thank you very much for inviting me to moderate. We're going to be talking about international psychedelics business, and it's so great to have such a great panel here today. So I'm going to kind of introduce everyone and their title, and perhaps we can kind of go around and you can do a little bit of introduction about yourself as well. So we have Terri Smith. Hi, Terri Smith. Terri Smith has the coolest title ever, Chief Mycologist at Wake. We also have Irie Selkirk, co-founder of director of Rise Wellness Retreats. Hi, Irie. And we have Anne Barnes, who's CEO of Edica Naturals and director of Red Light Holland. So maybe we kick it off, Terri. Maybe you tell us a little bit about yourself, and then Irie, and then Anne.
Thank you so much. I am really honored, and it's very exciting to be part of this. And especially today when I can talk to you from Jamaica while you're in the cold and the rains have stopped falling in Jamaica. So I'm especially happy. I wear many hats. I am the CEO of Wake Jamaica Limited. I am responsible for cultivation throughout the organization. So Chief Mycologist is just one of the things that I have to decide on. What's exciting for me about being part of Wake is Wake's commitment to social impact. So we are, what's different about what we do is that we have a decentralized approach to producing psilocybin. Our mushrooms are grown by networks of women across the island of Jamaica. And so we have been developing artisan mushroom growers across the island, since I'm also the founder of the Network of Women for Food Security and the Association of Mushroom Producers. So I'm very excited to represent not just Wake, but to represent the artisan farmers that make up our company. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Irie?
Yeah, hi, Sabrina. Thank you so much for hosting this, and to Canndora for putting this together. It really is an honor to be speaking amongst women who are innovating in this space. So I also do many things in the space, as I think most of us do at this kind of startup point. And what we're doing is working with a few different verticals in the wellness space. So we have Rise Wellness Retreat, which has been operating down in Jamaica for over a year. And we have Sansero Life Science, which is our drug development vertical, where we are creating novel formulations with low doses of psilocybin. And then lastly, we also have an education and a consumer vertical which is called A Good Mushroom, which lives here in Toronto. So I work with the conglomerate that houses all of those different verticals, and yes, wearing many hats as well.
Great, thank you so much. Anne?
Again, thank you to you for hosting Canndora and Sabrina as you. And again, lovely ladies, I'm honored to be a part of this incredible dynamic group. So my background is I kind of came into this from the health and wellness cannabis space. I have the honor of being a director of Red Light Holland. And what Red Light does differently than I think any other company at this point is focusing on truffles, on their potency, and on the manufacturing standards. So we are focusing on selling immediately versus other business models in the psychedelic space, which have various sort of medical intellectual property focuses, or sort of bricks and mortar, site-specific type of companies. We're looking at it more of a recreational retail, but with a medical aspect to it as well, from a data mining perspective and mental health focus.
Okay, I got to remember to unmute. Excellent. So Terri, I'll start with you. My first question. So there's a real shift in growing acceptance of psychedelics and its use in medical treatment around the world. We're seeing this. How do you foresee the impact this will have on Wake in terms of growth, and the role in terms of consumer education, destigmatization? If you could talk a bit about that.
Well, Jamaica is a really special place to be doing all of this, because in Jamaica, we've kind of in a gray space where the practicing of consuming psilocybin is nobody will bother you. It's legal. You can grow your mushroom. The law comes into play when you try to export, when you try to address that. So Wake has been at the forefront, working with the Jamaican government, with JAMPRO, with Ministry of Health. We have been working with clinical trials and clinical studies and backing it up with the science of it. What we find is exciting for us in Jamaica is that, just like when I started the Jamaican mushroom industry, because when I started growing mushroom in Jamaica almost 10 years ago, I was told that Jamaica was not a mushroom country. And when I decided to include psilocybin in what I was doing, I was told that Jamaicans would not be accepting of that. And that has been the opposite of what has happened. The Jamaicans, the government officials I work with, the people in the know, and the regular folks on the ground are all very exciting. And as it becomes legal in other jurisdictions, like this morning at 10:30, we had the JAMPRO, which means really Jamaican Promotions. We had that office in interviews on the radio explaining why mushrooms and psychedelics were really a good thing for us to get involved with. So there has been a groundswell. And we think the fact that Jamaica has many microclimates, so we are now growing, and with a decentralized production system, we can grow all different kinds of mushrooms. And because we're not just psychedelics, we're also functional and edibles. We have the opportunity to play out different types of psilocybin that other people are not growing across the island. I think the quality of our air and the quality of water, and the fact that Wake at the moment is the only company I know that is growing their mushrooms using bamboo leaves and lemongrass. We have some really unique aspects to what we're doing. We're also probably the largest company in the region that is putting in investment in bricks and mortar. We are near completion of a 23,000 square foot facility for growing the mushrooms. So I say all of that to say we're feeling very confident about what the future holds for Wake and for mushrooms, and really for social enterprise, because the ladies that grow our mushroom in the community are part of the triple bottom line that Wake pushes. Every community we enter must be better when we leave, financially, socially, and environmentally.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I already see questions popping up about growing. So I think we're going to have a lot of questions going your way about growing for sure. Irie, so your companies have a interesting, I didn't know about Good Mushroom. That's amazing. That's a new one. So you have under Canada Global, you have the psilocybin based pharmaceutical product development, and then you have the Rise Wellness Retreat side. So you're really bridging medicine, science, wellness, and now even education. How is this business model beneficial and complementary?
Yep. Okay. Unmuted. I did it. I got it. So, we find this model really beneficial to what we're doing. Everything we're doing is rooted in science, coming from a deep understanding of psilocybin and of these molecules, lifetime of reverence and understanding of how they work with individuals. Having the program at Rise has really been vital to the development of the formulas that we've been creating. So, we've been down in Jamaica for, well over 3 years now, tweaking these formulas and collecting data and working towards these novel formulations that we have. And by focusing on a fully integrative wellness program, we're really looking to the future of wellness that we want to see. We're trying to embody that. And it's not just about using, a quick fix pharmaceutical. It's not about this one fix wonder that's going to do anything for you. It really is about evolving the way that we look at this for an integrative wellness, and you're looking at integrative healthcare. We're also unique in that we offer a low dose formulation. So we see incredible value in macrodose and large dose therapies, what we'll sort of refer to as the deep dive. But we also see incredible accessibility for low dose formulations. So, it's allowed us to develop IP around our formulations, and but it's also allowed us to develop different nootropics. And speaking about a good mushroom, being able to look at different CPG products that are incorporating these functional mushrooms and really bringing the nutritive and healing powers of mushrooms to individuals. I know that we both come from, and actually, so many of us do on this space. Obviously, it's Canndora, coming from the cannabis industry. And knowing that there's this really interesting opportunity at this nascent moment to have, regulation driven by science and driven by consumer awareness and market awareness and demand, and that's all education based. So you see these different pillars working together. I think that education is the core of it. So being able to have that conversation at Rise has been so important as well. And ultimately changing people's lives for the better is so incredibly compelling.
Great, thank you so much. I think it's great you talked about the value in getting information on your treatment. So do you gather information on your treatment and therapies, and that kind of feeds back into the drug development process?
Yeah, and also on the therapeutic process. So, our co-founding members, we, like I said, we're rooted in science. So really looking at the fact that psilocybin, it's a tool, and people need the skill set around those tools as we look at new ways to care for ourselves. And, especially now in this sort of echo pandemic that we're starting to see come around right now, it's really about having the ability to evolve with that as well on the therapeutic level. So gathering information, having IP around the therapy, but also feeding our drug development with Sansero.
Great, thank you so much. Anne, so you have an interesting background as well. Irie comes from kind of the cannabis space. You have some background in terms of Peace Naturals. Do you see any, differences in terms of the psychedelic industry rather than the cannabis industry? Anything that we can learn from mistakes in the cannabis industry moving forward?
Yeah, there are a lot of mistakes that were made in cannabis, and I would own them. I would own them because we were the first ones, so we made a lot of mistakes and had to improve on Health Canada's watch. So it was a difficult time to start out, but we did it. Yeah, in terms of like similarities, I would say there's a lot of similarities, but there's a lot of great differences, and I think the differences are what makes the psychedelic industry so much more dynamic and so much more accessible, especially to women. So in terms of like similarities, I would say, you know, plant-based in terms of psilocybin and the mushroom side of it. Mental health also a big part of it. In terms of cannabis, I would say that it was more focused in the beginning on pain management. So I'm seeing the difference in terms of pain management versus mental health and sort of a division between the two in terms of the psychedelic science and benefits, really fast tracking on that side. One of the main things I think on that very vein is the difference in scientific approach from the cannabis industry and the psychedelic industry. The psychedelic industry having such a rich, decades worth of research, university academic base, which just wasn't a reality in the cannabis space. So I felt like the regulatory piece of it was very difficult to maneuver around, and actually it was almost like the regulatory framework was trying to frame the framework for science. Whereas I think in the psychedelic industry, to our benefit, I think it's an absolutely dynamic industry, and that science, and as Irie was saying earlier, the educational aspect is so much greater, which I'm truly grateful for, because I think from that we can actually have the psychedelic industry really give back to the community in terms of that mental health and benefiting people individually versus the cannabis side that started out as a recreational play. And being in the industry, you started to realize like very quickly that that rec user actually was a medicinal user. And I think that co-merging of those two concepts has been greatly beneficial to the psychedelic industry, so that we can understand that it's not an abhorrent use of a drug to try to get high, but rather an opportunity to use medicine that can help on a daily basis for daily stresses, and microdosing versus the larger treatments. So I'm seeing that there's a lot of learning from the cannabis space that is now being applied to the psychedelic industry. So I'm grateful for that, because there was a lot to learn.
Yeah, we're also seeing that, psychedelics is like the new cannabis for investors as well. So it's interesting. Sorry, someone was saying something.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to just jump off quickly what Anne was saying. This is a question and a topic for a lot of people, and I think it behooves us on the international panel to acknowledge the sort of influx of finance that's coming into this field of work right now, and ensuring that people are looking at this with eyes wide open, that this is not a get rich and you're going to get your money back quick. This is long-term drug development. This is about making innovative change in mental health for the entire globe. So I think that there was a lot of, I'm just going to say it, there was a lot of pump and dump taking place in the cannabis industry, and it was pretty gross, and it ended up with a lot of socioeconomic barriers, and the patients ended up carrying a lot of that burden. And so just had to take a minute to just acknowledge that. And, for anyone, any investors, anyone who's, startup in this, to really look at the triple bottom line and, the social impact that Terry's mentioning, and, what we can really do as opposed, to improve the world as well as shareholders' profits.
Agreed. And I think that's a very, very important thing for me personally. And you mentioned it about education. Like, to me, the psychedelic is about education, not egos. Cannabis was very much about ego, and it was a press release driven market rather than science, fact, function driven, which I see the psychedelic being a huge benefactor of what we've learned from cannabis.
Yeah, I'm just so glad I'm seeing so much. It was interesting what you said, and in that it's more conducive to women. Do you feel like that this industry is a little bit more conducive than the cannabis industry?
I think it is in that it's less it's more science fact based.
Mhm.
It's more advocacy based,
Yeah.
which I see as being community focused. So grassroots community actions, I think, and it speaks volumes in terms of the work that's been done in the research and science communities for the last number of decades. You know, these are true trailblazers that have led an incredible information journey that we can benefit from, but hopefully in a much more from a shareholder perspective and from you know, entrepreneurial perspective, hopefully in a much more strategic focused way with much better communication and more community advocacy for sure, I think needs to happen.
That's great. I'm going to flip back to Terri. How do you think about, you talked about social impact, and, you know, there was this research study I was reading, it was published 2018, about the importance of inclusivity and diversity, even in the research and the science that we do, which I think is really critical. How do you think about values and culture and applying that sort of intentionality behind Wake's growth and development?
Ooh, that is a big one.
Yes, I give you the big one.
I think there is something awesome, cool about the timing of psychedelics, and that especially for Jamaica, psychedelics came in right at the time while cannabis was imploding. And so, you know, it's been top of mind for everybody, for our governments, for leaders, for investors. Then when it came to Wake, one of the things that excited me about it is that the diversity and inclusivity, because today you have two faces from Wake, and we start at the end of the different spectrum as far as, you know, Olga and Terri are an important part of the Wake story, but we also have the Brazilians, and we have when you look at the faces on a Wake call, you see that we represent a whole range of places: Antigua, Trinidad, Jamaica, Barbados. We've got all of those spectrum covered. So it is something that we include, but it's not just a nice thing to do. It's that you cannot grow mushroom at the commercial level in Jamaica without having someone who understands the climate, the culture. We don't have any of the available substrate that you would normally have in any country. Just from a practical standpoint, Jamaica does not grow wheat, soybeans. We have no hardwood industry. So we can't have sawdust. We don't grow rice. We don't do any of that. So it takes an extraordinary amount of ingenuity to just have the practical things to raise the mushroom. We are covered with limestone across the island. Our women are in the lowlands of St. Elizabeth, where it's hot and humid, and then there's some of them in the highlands in Manchester, where it's cool. So the inclusivity was not a nice thing. It was designed that if you are really going to grow mushrooms in Jamaica, and that's where you can read the press releases of all these people hitting the stock market, and they will say things like, you know, we've been growing in Jamaica since January, or we're doing this in Jamaica. And I just have to read it and find out, no, you're not. You know, there is no way you're growing that amount of mushroom in Jamaica, because I know where it is. That's a cannabis farm that you are representing. That's not a mushroom. And so I think the mushroom itself is magical in that it needs the love, it needs the attention of the women. It's actually built. You can't do factory farming with psilocybin and functional mushroom. You need that individual attention. And so the mushroom itself is demanding how inclusive we are. It's saying, hey, This is not something that you put up a big price and say there are 10 different licenses that you must get before you can produce mushroom. No, the mushroom is, and the psychedelic nature of it is demanding how I know the Jamaica and beyond the Caribbean is developing as far as mushroom cultivation goes right now. It's not up to us. The spirit of the mushroom is dictating what we do, and it is awesome food.
I love that. I love that. I'm going to flip now to Anne. So Red Light Holland's business revolves around production, growth, scale. So obviously the importance of supply chain, quality, extraction, et cetera. Can you speak a little bit about how you achieve this?
Yeah, so Red Light, what attracted me to Red Light was the fact that they're focused on revenue. So coming from the cannabis, revenue positive was what really I love, and the fact that they were going to be producing mushrooms. So and I love plants. So that's what I thought was really outstanding about them, with their focus on GMP standards and looking at the Netherlands, where truffles are actually considered a food and are actually sold legally. So in terms of Red Light's platform, launched in the midst of the pandemic, which was challenging and difficult. Also, a little bit of a challenge with with our the tourism and that type of thing. So it's definitely affected us. But having said all that, like really focusing on the iMicrodosing platform, so bringing the truffles to the microdose level to introduce it to people of the Netherlands in terms of more of a daily or a weekly consumption rather than the hero dose type of approach. And with that, have also just recently announced a really incredible scientific app that Sarah will be speaking about, which basically helps to analyze an individual's response to the microdose through posture, through data analytics in terms of like your actual physiological function to help with diagnosing and understanding mental health issues and building a community that can then help with a combined access to that information so that people can understand how the microdose can affect them, benefit them, and help them over time. So those are some of the things that we're excited to be working on.
That's amazing. That's great. It's great to see, like, some of the comments are about the importance of science and data. And it's great to see that everybody has that built into their businesses. I think that's great. I'm going to flip to Irie. What is your perspective on synthetic versus natural? Mute.
Yeah, got it. So, I think we can all agree that there's a place for both in healthcare. So I'm not going to get into a larger conversation about that. But really what we're doing is focusing on natural molecules, combinations of natural molecules that allow for reduced dose and increased efficacy. So, there's a huge body of research on how beneficial these molecules can be for us. But what Anne was mentioning, this larger dose therapy is not it's not accessible to everyone, as from so many different levels, from an economic standpoint, from a cultural standpoint, as well from a mental health standpoint. That's some people just don't have the risk tolerance for that. So for me, it's about reaching and influencing the greatest good with the greatest number of people. And this modern pharma approach to more potent or a single molecule approach where you're producing a stronger effect and it's a single dose. But when you're working with natural molecules and you're finding these specific combinations, it's really about finding a low dose that is more effective, that mitigates those negative side effects that people are not enjoying or finding beneficial, that people can take on a daily, regular basis. So, coming from, I guess, the same sort of philosophy, but definitely from a medical standpoint, increasing standardization and access, educating our healthcare professionals around this, because as an individual who has a lifetime of experience with natural health medicines, cannabis as well, moving into psychedelics, I can absolutely tell you it is not the only thing that is going to help you. It is what I consider to be step 2 of perhaps 3. So I think it's incredibly important that we standardize and look at how we can relate to the consumer that exists right now. But from more of a larger view of that, we know, again, referring to the cannabis space, we've got all of these entourage effects. You have these multitudes of alkaloids and different terpenoids that, we find in cannabis and in ayahuasca as well. And there's great value in that. So for us, it's really about harnessing that knowledge that humans have been working with these tools, these social medicine tools for millennia. And it's really about legitimizing it, standardizing it, creating the proper container through different experiences and different educational touch points for people, but ultimately creating innovation in mental health care, which we haven't seen in our lifetime at all. So if we can actually start to offer people low dose formulations that are more accessible with natural molecules, then that's where I see an increase in, or at least a good fighting chance against this mental health, increasing mental health pandemic or epidemic that we find ourselves in.
Great. Does anyone have anything to add? Because I want to try to get to some of the questions now to make sure that we have some time. Let's see here.
If I could just add one thing, just in terms of like the international business aspect of it, to put it in perspective, the cannabis market was expected to be valued at 3.8 billion by 2026. The psychedelic industry is 6.8 billion by 2027. Like that, just sort of like, wow. And then on top of that, to go back to what Terri and Irie were speaking of earlier, and I love the fact that Terri actually is creating functional mushrooms, that the functional mushroom market is supposed to be 36 billion by 2025. So there's lots of room for everybody. It's just what I wanted to share with everybody.
No, that's great. Thank you. All right. So one question here, and I knew that we would have a grow question. Question for Terri: how can we start growing our own mushrooms? Give us advice, please.
Oh, that is both simple and complex. If you
Yes.
just want, which mushrooms do you want to grow? If you just want to grow psychedelics for, psilocybin for personal use, that's really simple. You need to have, you could order some spores over the internet. Liquid spores has never been illegal because most of the time it falls under research category. You'll need a tub, you'll need some grains, and it helps if you have a pressure cooker so that you can pasteurize the grains. You don't want to sterilize the grain because you want some beneficial things left in it. So you want to pasteurize that grain. But you could just send me a note at tsmith@wake.net and I could work that out with you. So, but it's rather simple. A little corner of your closet, a little bit of a Rubbermaid clear container, maybe a piece of black plastic bag, and I could hook you up third world style. So it's not very complicated at all. Yeah, just reach out and I'll help you grow your own stuff. If you want to grow edible mushrooms, then I'm going to say, because, say, for instance, oyster mushroom has the most lovastatin. If you want to have something that's going to be functional for your cholesterol, which I know a lot of you Canadians with all that rich food has, then that's a different kettle of fish, or some lion's mane, which is great for your brain health. I kind of like to encourage people to mix their mushrooms. So have some psychedelic for your brain, for your mental health, but also throw in some lion's mane in there so that you can like boost your brain power, or throw in a little bit of lovastatin to clear your heart. But hey, reach out and I'll hook you up. That's what we Jamaicans do. We hook you up.
It looks like they put
I
your
just wanted
email
to
there.
also mention that people can also buy online, as Polly mentioned, or Terry mentioned, the spores. You can also buy inoculated bags if you just want to give it a try in your window and see your hand at it first. There are online many different, they call it a substrate bag, and it comes to you and you literally just add some water and you can watch the mushrooms grow. So, you know, you can get really involved with it and get in touch and find out how to do that. And also if you just want to give it a try and have an introduction to that, those are available online everywhere. And of course, I got to plug, we have them at A Good Mushroom too. So you've got international options and local options too.
Great. We have a question for Anne here. Thank you, Irie, and thank you, Terry. We have a question for Anne. This is Elizabeth, Washington, D.C. Could you please let us know the source of the data points that you have cited?
Yes, I believe they were, actually I've cited them. I can send those through. They were all financial sites, which were as of today's date. So I can send those through to the
Excellent.
group. Happy
Thank
to do
you.
that,
If you look at psychedelic finance, they have a lot of those data points cited, and it's an incredibly comprehensive list.
Great, thank you. Does anyone have any insight or information on macrodosing during pregnancy or utilizing mushrooms during labor for pain control? Sorry, microdosing during pregnancy, autocorrect. Okay.
So I'm happy to discuss this briefly. You know, many of the researchers that we work with do fall into the belief that psilocybin and magic mushrooms are one of the safest substances known to mankind. However, although the half-life is very short in comparison to other medicines, psychedelics actually leave your body really quickly. But they do cross the placenta. So obviously no research there, obviously, you know, all anecdotal information. So I would urge that individual to do more research, reach out to doulas and different midwives that might have more experience with plant allies and natural allies for pregnancy. But you will probably in that research find many other herbal allies that can be incredibly beneficial for the different symptoms of pregnancy.
Great, thank you. Question here, can you please ask where the best places are for professionals to get additional training for prescribing and treating clients with mushrooms? For example, recently legalized in Oregon. So any thoughts on that?
I've got some information to share. If
Maybe you could just post it.
Yeah, so MAPS Canada is a great resource. I recently co-founded the Toronto chapter for their support group, the Multidisciplinary Association of Psychedelic Studies. They've been around for over 30 years, and if you don't know them, please do, because it's going to behoove you. Another great group is Fluence, F-L-U-E-N-C-E, and they're based in New York, but they do incredible work, and also offering training for healthcare professionals. We also do this down at Rise as well.
Great. So it looks like we don't have that much time. So maybe really quickly, maybe in terms of closing, what's your, in a quick sentence, what's your vision for the future of psychedelics, and where do you see your role, your company's role? So maybe we start with Terri.
You know, I'm going to get you. I think it's really exciting, and I can't come up with a better way of saying it but that. It's awesome, cool to be a girl, to be involved with mushrooms, the people that you meet there is so amazing. Like, I get to work with scientists like Olga, I get to work with amazing folks, and we have so much learning from what not to do with cannabis, because they are right in front of us. So I think the sky's the limit. I see in a country like Jamaica having plant medicine for my people. Mm-hmm. The Europeans were probably the only people who didn't have rite of passage rituals and plants that they use. But it's awesome cool to be in a world where we get to grow our own medicine, eat our own medicine with no side effects. Like, we don't have to be scared or hand out a piece of paper that says, this is going to make you crazy, or you're going to need to go to the bathroom extra after you eat my mushrooms. So I can hand my mushrooms to people and just be pleased that it's going to change them. And in the meantime, I'm having an impact on the world. That is awesome, cool. And that's what we do at Wake.
Amazing, amazing. Yay. Anne?
I'm just plant-based everything. I love everything to do with plants. It's been my life. It's been my life mission. So I'm so excited to be a part of this community. I'm so excited to be part of not just the magical aspect of, the psilocybin, but the magical aspect out of all of these plants and what all mushrooms do. And what Terri was saying, like mind's mean, I'm thrilled to be part of the functional mushroom industry, and that is a huge passion of mine. So I just see this as really growing communities and growing education and understanding about mental health. And I think that we can do this through understanding how the plants help to naturally heal us.
Irie?
I'm not on mute for the first time. So really just echoing what Terri and Anne are both saying. This is an incredibly pivotal time where we now get to look at innovation and, I dare say, regeneration, which is so deeply tied to the mycelial network that we are here. So, in cannabis, we were trailblazing. In psilocybin, we are laying the groundwork. And I'm just so honored to be able to bring our expertise and our understanding of this to an industry. So thank you.
Thanks. I'll just quickly say something as well. I've been doing clinical research for 20 years, and I was one of those a nurse in the field, kind of figuring out the cocktail of drugs I need to give a patient. And for me, it's just, adding to Terri, it's just so amazing that people can be in a place where they can grow their own medicine. I think that's amazing. And, I worked in the cannabis industry trying to push people and explain why research is important. I think it's amazing in the psychedelic industry that there's no explanation needed. Research science is the foundation. And so really excited to be part of this industry. More excited than the cannabis for sure. Well, thank you so much, ladies. It was a pleasure. And thank you, Canndora, for this great panel and highlighting women in the industry, and for the phenomenal panelists, Anne Barnes, Irie Selkirk, and Terri Smith. Thank you so much.
Thank you again, Danielle, Tracy, and your team at Canndora for putting on such a great event. My name is Salome Tabrizi, and I'm honored to be your moderator for the second panel today, Psilocybin and Women, What Does Science Say? Now, with the resurgence of psychedelics at this time, it's such a wonderful time to have the great information in our communities. But what I'm most excited about this conversation is that we're digging deep now, and we're really highlighting a population that we're all connected to. But I know it's, for myself with my clients, it's so important to know, what specifically works for women empowerment, women trauma, and all the life stages of women. So before I pass it over to our esteemed panelists to introduce themselves, I'll introduce a little bit about my work. As I shared, my name is Salome, and I'm one of the founding members of the Canadian Psychedelic Association. And the CPA came about last year as a nonprofit to create a common voice for Canadians, especially those who are just entering the psychedelic space and those who have been leaders in this space as well, and just connecting the different nodes across our great nation. One of the main strategies for the CPA has been decriminalization, and we recently had a petition with at the federal level for 15,000 signatures, close to 15,000 signatures, and then have been pushing more on the municipal level, especially where our base is in Vancouver, and Vancouver just decriminalized. But it's not fully there yet. It's going to be passed. The exemption has to be passed federally, and so they'll be waiting for the government to give their response. And once the exemption happens, it's only for possession, so it doesn't include sharing or gifting, whereas the decrim movement in the United States does do that. So the work is just beginning, and that's just one of the frameworks. My other hat in this realm is an integration therapist. I've worked deeply in the ayahuasca space for many years, both in ceremony and outside. And I help people go through deep dives with psilocybin as part of their client work as well. So without further ado, the panelists that we have today with us are Susan Chappell she's the president of Haven Labs. We also have Sarah Hashkes, who's an advisor at Red Light Holland and also the CEO of Radix Motion. And we also have Dr. Olga Chernolos, the Chief Scientific Officer at Wake. So I'll just ask maybe Susan to introduce herself and share a little bit about her background and also what inspired you to join this movement and this community.
Salome, thank you so much. And thank you for all the work that the CPA is doing as well. It's incredible. I come from the natural healthcare space my gosh, it's been over 30 years now of running multidisciplinary clinics. Before multidisciplinary clinics existed, we developed the first one in the Sea to Sky corridor just north of Vancouver. I was a massage therapist, but I went into clinical neurobiology in order to understand mechanism. I really enjoyed doing manual therapy, but understanding how natural health actually affects people and at the very deep cellular level was a burning question for me. And I feel the same about plant medicine. So 12 years in clinical research and publishing papers on mechanism of wound healing and the vagus nerve. My interest in plant medicine happened because I basically, in my clinic, I was treating cancer patients and many of them were already utilizing plant medicine. They were using mushrooms, microdosing mushrooms, as well as using cannabis. And in our community, we had 6 or 7 community-based cannabis dispensaries in a very small population of 17,000. So our community is very plant-based, medicine oriented. Our economy ran off of that. And we had no land use for it. So the integration of multiple levels of government became an incredible policy issue that had to be overcome. So I ran for city politics and spent 2 terms in municipal politics, helping with zoning for plant medicine, as well as integrating healthcare data into land use and zoning. So it's been a long haul, but always focused on access to medicine and healthcare for, in particular, women, because we tend to take the brunt of healthcare, and especially in mental health.
Thank you so much, Susan, for that great share. It sounds like you bring a lot of diverse pieces into your work. That's wonderful. Next, Sarah, if you don't mind sharing.
Hi. So my story with psychedelics starts around 7 years ago through a personal experience that I had that was so significant and so beyond any model that I had, any words that I could put to it. And I was right before going back to graduate school for a master's in cognitive neuroscience. And it really pivoted my research into trying to find models and words and math that I could put, and biology that I could create a model behind this very personal but also global experience that people are having. So I did a lot of research into it, published a paper that it took around 2 years for my ideas to now start becoming a lot more popular amongst the biggest psychedelic researchers out there. And I also combine my research with immersive technology, which is why there's a dancing psychedelic me blowing kisses at y'all right now. Because there is a lot we can do with technology to mimic some of the effects of psychedelics. And there's a lot of synergies that we can create by utilizing technology to help us understand what's going on inside our bodies and help us create these tighter feedback loops that can help us also understand how to use psychedelics better.
Excellent. Really fascinating, Sarah. And it sounds like you've been ahead of the curve and now you get to share that even more. That's wonderful. Thank you. And Olga, please.
Hello, everybody. I'd like to thank Canndora for keeping on putting these wonderful events. especially in the year like 2020. It is so wonderful to see so many familiar faces, albeit on the computer screen versus the usual format, but that's what we have to do with for now. It's, again, just wonderful to see all the enthusiastic and open-minded women to tune in and giving psychedelics a try, if not in practical sense, at least being open to learning more about this avenue in therapeutics. So I am a neuroscientist and pharmacist by training. And it's very natural for me to be in this space because I've trained to decipher how do things that work in our brains actually do work. So having worked out of the teaching mental hospital for many, many years and having a privilege to follow some of the very, very complex cases in various mental health conditions, when I started seeing data coming from the psychedelic research being put out by a number of academic centers around the world, I literally could not believe the weight of the data. I could not believe how effective psychedelics could be for treatment of some of the mental health conditions. So when I saw that, I knew that I had to be a part of this resurgence of research and psychedelic research renaissance. So I could not be happier being a part of a wonderful team at Wake, where we are truly science driven. And there are so many academic partnerships that we have right now for various projects, from growing the mushroom to using the mushroom in clinical trials and everything in between. So I'm one happy woman, and hopefully the work that we're doing at Wake can make many more people as happy as I am.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Olga. And maybe we can just continue with what you're sharing right now, especially in regards to the research. We can start general and then maybe titrate down. So just give our viewers a bit more of an understanding of how psychedelics work with the brain.
So we have to be cognizant that all the research that has been done with psilocybin specifically, we're not talking about different psychedelics. So everything that's been done in controlled clinical trials has been done in full dose scenarios. So the microdosing that seems to be extremely popular today, you'd be surprised to learn that there is 0 clinical trials that we have as of today. I know of one trial coming from the Imperial College of London hopefully in the coming month. But with microdosing, we don't really know. Luckily for the full dose psilocybin assisted therapy, there is far more clarity on how it actually works. So psychedelics and psilocybin specifically work on one of the subtypes of the serotonin receptor. So serotonin is the molecule that makes us happy and makes us excited. So working on this specific subtype of the serotonin receptor, full dose psychedelics seem to truly flip the switch and kick people out of the usual way of processing the information, including traumatic information, and just taking a step back and having an ability to not drive the usual tracks that sometimes is helpful in our everyday life, but sometimes can be very detrimental, especially when we are talking about clinical conditions in mental health. So psychedelics truly take us out of it and allow us to reprocess this information in a new way. And one more thing that we have to remember is that today, in the new psychedelic research that you can say started in late 1990s, early 2000s, psychedelic therapy is always seen as a psychedelic assisted therapy. So it's not just that you pop in your couple hero doses of magic mushrooms and you're good to go. So psychedelics are always in a full dosing context. They're always a part of the psychedelic assisted therapy. So people are working with their psychologists and their clinical team to prepare for the experience, to unpack what they found during their dosing experiences, and to help them integrate this newly found knowledge and way of seeing and doing into actually becoming the new way of living and processing the information. And as far as microdosing goes, and from many of the people on the call today, it seems like it's an area of big interest for companies in this nascent space. We at Wake are looking to bridge the gap in knowledge that exists from, as I said, all the research that has been done with full dosing. And moreover, it's been done with a synthetic compound. Whereas when people microdose, in the vast majority of cases, when they're microdosing with psilocybin, they are using the mushroom-based compound. So at Wake, not only we are actually doing the clinical research on microdosing, and you will see our first trial popping up on the clinicaltrials.gov in coming weeks. So not only we are doing the research, and we are doing it to the highest standards so that the data that we obtain can stand to any test of scrutiny, because working in this area, we have to realize that, you know, through all the negativity and the lens of criminalization, there are not less, but more scrutiny to the work that we are doing. So we are absolutely prepared for that by doing all the necessary work at the top level and beyond. So we're doing microdosing research, and we are doing it with the mushrooms that we ourselves produce, and with the mushrooms that we produce to the GMP standards, so that we can take the substance and use it in clinical trials and be allowed to do so. So I'm truly, truly excited to come back, say, in a year's time with the data from our clinical trials and share it with you all.
Thank you so much, Olga. That's so exciting that it is vertically integrated and you grow your own, and now expanding into a much needed space with microdosing. And I love the organic aspects of it. Really great. Susan, how about for you? Let's actually move into more focus of the research.
Can we just take a brief moment to, as it was still wide frame, to talk a little bit about this predictive coding framework I'm really trying to put out there to people, because I think it can really augment what Olga was talking about. Is that okay, Susan? Sorry.
Go for it.
According to this predictive coding framework, we look at the brain as a prediction machine that combines two sources of information: whatever is coming from our senses right now, and our priors or biases, a model that has already been created based on all our history and knowledge. And when we look at where these 5-HT2A receptors are sitting in our cortical columns in our brain, we can actually see that they are sitting on the feedback loops. on the parts of the neural circuitry that are creating these top-down biases that we have. So we know that these parts of the brain are getting oversensitive because of the psilocybin and triggered more easily. So the example I like giving people is if you imagine your brain is creating sandcastles. So you have these top-down buckets, your biases that are constantly getting incoming sand from your senses, and you're actually building your reality with these sandcastles. So by taking psilocybin, you're actually breaking down these buckets into smaller shaped buckets that can then create a more detailed reality. And the side effect of this is that there's more incoming sand that is unbucketed, and your brain needs to start dealing with that sand by rerouting it. And then we get all these interesting effects like synesthesia or ego death, which I like to explain as, oh, when there's just such an overwhelming sensation, there's just too much sand, your brain just takes the most giant bucket it can find and just puts everything, your whole world, into one bucket. And we have this feeling of total oneness that can happen. So I just wanted to add that perspective, and I highly recommend anybody that's going into psychedelics research a bit more about this predictive coding framework. It really helps understand what's going on while you're tripping.
Really excellent, Sarah. I'm glad you jumped in and shared that model. I think these models are so important for people to grasp as what is happening internally for them, and for us as practitioners to help our clients to stay in the window of tolerance, and to help them when that big floodgate comes, like you said, all the sand that's coming out, extra sand, what to do with it. Really, really key point. Thank you. Susan, maybe you can share with us a little bit about the research that you are doing and you and your team are doing, and what is most exciting about it.
Thanks, Salome. You know, I'd actually like to bring it back a bit from the central nervous system. Because, you know, Olga and Sarah both have amazing points, and it's all centrally located in our nervous system. But as we know, psilocybin and 5-HT receptors, a lot of it, the questions that I'm going to raise are going to be sex-based questions, because you know, the way we experience these drugs has not been really differentiated. There's very little literature on how women are differentiated from men in the 5-H2A receptor. There's a little bit of information on estrogen and the 5-HT receptor, which I find really interesting, because maybe that is one of the ego dissolution sex differences between people that are not taking psilocybin and just regularly, because estrogen is a 5-HT receptor agonist. It basically causes 5-HT receptors to fire and can be inhibited as well by illness. And the prevalence of mental health disorders differs significantly between men and women. And we haven't done enough work on the basically the peripheral integrations of the 5-HT receptors. And a lot of times we study these drugs and we look at the central nervous system and we get caught up in how people feel about it, but we don't look at other things like inflammatory mediators or cytokines. We haven't, like, there isn't a single paper on cytokine differences in people that take full spectrum mushrooms. And we study, a lot of the studies that we do are on synthetics. So synthetics, and the difference between synthetics and natural entourage mushrooms can be the difference of psilocybin into psilocin. Psilocin that's dissolved in the gut, and we know that the gut has a ton of serotonin receptors. And the majority, there's only 2% in our brain. So the entourage effect and how people are generally taking mushrooms, a lot of it is dissolved in our guts. And after that, the other compounds available, we know very little about. So I just wanted to raise that question, central nervous system. All my work is in the peripheral nervous system. So I'm interested in IL-2 and in inflammatory mediators. I look at the fact that we have 5-HT2C receptors on our heart valves. And there's been some discussion of heart valve difficulties in serotonin-related drugs. Even though they were weight loss drugs, they were still drugs that affected our serotonin system. So for safety profile, even though we know they're so much safer than SSRIs, and that people have been taking these drugs for a significant amount of time. And there's been a, 3 decades worth of research, but all on the central nervous system. So the breakdown of the mushroom into its compounds and understanding variables is so interesting to me. Also, basically, the sex as a biological variable has not been done well in our studies and really has to be considered. The modeling has to be done better. Our methods aren't well described. And all of these things, they sound like problems, but really they're opportunities. The opportunity for research in psychedelics, since it's been really difficult for researchers to study the entourage effect because we have not had biological variables in the mushrooms and the plants available to us. It's so interesting going forward to see how the entourage effect, Olga mentioned microdosing. That is absolutely true, that we don't have long-term data. We only have short-term data on the use of psychedelics. So, there's a lot of N=1 research. There's a lot of self-reporting, which introduces bias. We don't have research that has very excellent controls. So out of all of these things, Haven is interested. When I looked at the amount of issues that were in research, and I read extensive literature and did reviews, the availability for compounds to be delivered to researchers is very limited. And I so appreciate Terri and Olga's work with Wake, doing the work on proper entourage mushrooms and with proper science. This is exactly how the work is going to get done. In North America, we have a different system with the Controlled Substances Act. So policy between the different levels of government, it's really interesting that you spoke about Vancouver's optimism about, access to safe compounds. And at the same time, they have no zoning available for psychedelic companies to be in Vancouver. If you try and open up a company for research in Vancouver, you will be refused because they have no zoning available. This happened exactly the same in cannabis. We had the federal government mandating that this was a legal substance. We had the provinces taking care of distribution, and yet our community-based verticals were completely eliminated by the safety police. So I am hoping that, and we already have a lot of mushroom grows in our community, and we already have women accessing these mushroom grows and doing citizen science to access microdosing and macrodosing and not being able to report the effects, but using community-based groups like Facebook to discuss amongst themselves. So how are we going to integrate citizen science with politics? There's so much work to be done, and it's going to take everybody collaborating together and being very open with their information and publications, helping each other access the compounds and helping each other with the hypothesis. There's going to be a lot of people that are really interested in getting into science without the skills. So hopefully our companies can actually help people with their hypotheses, with getting ethics review, and introducing these companies to research modalities that may be going on at universities. So yeah, it's such an exciting space to be in right now. And there's so many women entering the space. But I saw that in cannabis, and my skepticism that companies will continue to be male dominated and push women into lower ranks that are going to end up doing all the work is going to be an issue that we will also have to resolve, is equity and diversity in our psychedelic space. So, and especially with women experiencing most of the healthcare issues like substance use disorders, metabolic diseases, women try to commit suicide but aren't as successful as men way more often. Even though men are successful at committing suicide, women try way more often and tend to be unsuccessful. So I see psilocybin and the hopes of mental health care research as a way to be able to connect across all of these divides and actually provide human beings with a way of broadening their horizons and accessing hope.
Really great. Thank you so much, Susan, for that really broad background. And we have to continue this conversation regarding the public policy and the lack of research, and then the zoning issues and everything that we've learned from cannabis, and really making sure that it does not go into the same direction. I think many of us are cognizant of that and do not want that to happen. Yet at the same time, the plants are doing their thing. And, you know, I oftentimes say that this is not really in our hands, and all we can do is empower people underground, above ground, to just take more of the medicines and empower themselves, especially women and our voices in that regard. So I really appreciate what you said, and bring our men closer, you know, within their own feminine hearts and their well-being. I want to pass it back to Sarah. I want to be mindful of equal airtime. I want to pass it back to you, Sarah, and see, you know, if you have a response to Susan or just wanting to share a little bit more.
Yeah.
About research.
First of all, totally agree with just about everything Susan said. The fact that there are so many 5-HT2A receptors in our stomach and in other parts of our body. What are they doing? You know, generally, I have this idea that serotonin isn't so much a happy neurotransmitter, but it's more about predictive mechanism. How wide or narrow are these buckets? You see in plants, actually, serotonin regulates the plant's roots. So if you give more serotonin to plants, their root structure becomes more fragmented. So it's really interesting to sort of think maybe it's doing something similar in our bodies, throughout our bodies. But generally, when it comes, you know, to science, it's really important to ask, what are we measuring? And when we talk about sex differences, and we say men and women, biology is more complex than that. You know, are we measuring hormone differences? Are we measuring chromosomes? Are we measuring external genitalia? And this is something to be very aware of. And academic research is making slow progress, and I know I left academia because it's so hard to get access, like people, you know, are saying here, to these materials, to get approval. And I'm extremely grateful for the researchers that are doing that path, and everyone, the industry around it, that's enabling it. The path I chose for myself and what I'm trying to do with Red Light Holland is around big data. Can we complement academic research by using big data from masses of people out there that we all know of that are already experimenting with these substances for years? And can we give them the best tools that we are using in research to try to help them gather data, first for themselves, and second, if they're willing to share this data anonymously with the wider community, will that help us see wider patterns? Can we get thousands of people instead of, you know, the 13 or 20 or 30 people that are in a controlled academic research? So there's, of course, limitations to this type of data collection, but there's also a mass benefit. So I see a great potential for collaboration, and something that we can augment as a company, and coming more from the industry side. And also really hoping that we sort of take the lead on consent and privacy issues with these things. And hoping that when other companies see what we're doing, how much we care about the people that are going to be contributing their data, and how much we're making this fully consentful and privacy first and anonymous. Possibly this will help other companies realize that this is what we should be doing, and preventing misuse of this data, because that's also something really important in research. Yeah, and it's there's also the whole hormone aspect is really interesting, and most of that research, or at least a very significant amount, has been done in rats. So how much does that translate to us? Like, we really need more research to understand that. We are seeing women that are postmenopausal that then get estrogen or I can't say that word, but the other hormones, then have more 5-HT2A receptors. So now that we know that the 5-HT2A receptor is the main binding mechanism, we can start researching these effects. But when it comes to generally or so gender differences, there's mixed results out there. Some researchers are finding sex differences between men and women, some aren't. There is a difference in age. As we grow older, that seems to be a quite prominent finding in science. We lose more of our 5-HT2A receptors. So that is something to be aware of. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Sarah, and bringing the piece around hormones into the dialogue as well. Olga, what about for you? What has it been receiving with the ladies shared, and what would you like to add?
Absolutely, and I've posted a link to the John Hopkins real-world study on the psilocybin microdosing. So for any of you who wants to take part in the high quality research that will help in shaping the policy, which is a major issue for everybody on this call, because everything that we do is so heavily dependent on policy and regulations. And I'd like to think that all the work that we are doing in research is not going in vain. And today's UN's vote on rescheduling cannabis and actually recognizing its medicinal potential shows us that quality data can help bureaucrats do the right thing and make access to substances that many people may find helpful for whatever they suffer from, make this access easier and more beneficial. And as far as gender differences, it is very true that for many decades, the difference in response to medicines, not only response to the medicines that we have to different clinical conditions, but actually predominance of different clinical conditions varies by gender and by genetic makeup. So it used to be that the pharmaceutical companies would enroll primarily white people for their clinical trials. And now we understand that there is a lot of value in seeing the broad spectrum of genetic makeup, gender in response to different medications. So I'm very proud as a citizen and as a scientist to say that big portion of the clinical research that we would be running in Jamaica, working with the population that has majority of times been excluded from clinical trials. And as far as gender goes, for psychedelics today, there is very, very little data on how response to psychedelics may vary by gender, and I'm looking forward to having that oversight fixed.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Olga. I know that we're tight. This conversation, can be expanded much more, and I hope that it will be in future times. But I would love to bring it back to Susan. And Susan, you talked very extensively about the research that's missing, and then also what we know in the gut and what we don't know with 5-HT, the pieces around heart. Let's go more into the holistic way that you work with your clients and with the patients. Let's go more into the mind, body, spirit, and what differences you see maybe between men and women.
Thanks. My research isn't in my research with the company. We're creating supply chain. And then with my clinics, it's always been heart-centered and risk-willing, I would say, that, encouraging plant use in medicine. Access to good medications has become incredibly difficult for the women and many of our patients are hospice patients. So I would say one of the biggest challenges in seeing women that are already experiencing the benefits of plant medicine and are either cancer patients or hospice patients is this massive inequity in access. And Olga's work in Jamaica, the work at the retreat centers are amazing. There are grants available for people, but it's still, you think about the very limited amount of people that can access this. So again, I always come back to the equity of being able to access plant medicine, and it's available pretty easily, but for people that don't have the education or the knowledge, and the majority of my patients are older women experiencing horrific diseases. Now that we've gone to government-run dispensaries, the access to proper dosing, the access to knowledge about, the other day I gave a talk to about 10 older women that are in their 70s and 80s who had just read Michael Pollan's book. So I came to speak at their book review, and all of them were interested in taking therapeutic doses of psilocybin, and all of them were by themselves in their apartment, unable to see their families. So this pandemic has just driven mental health to the nth degree. And already, if you think of every 1 in 5 people experiencing some sort of mental health issue, and then not being able to access medicines because of expense or because of inability to access the supply chain. And it's a controlled drug. The fear that that creates in older patients, unwilling to try something because of a fear of being arrested. And I remember those days in cannabis where I was smoking drugs at political conferences underneath staircases while everybody was drinking inside. And how far we've come at being able to be open and even having these conversations is so amazing. But still, when I'm treating patients and I'm doing body work and integrated work, and they're having to use plant medicines, and they're also on fentanyl patches and all sorts of also crazy SSRIs, where the side effects are so significant. With they already have trouble with bowels and the SSRIs and other medications. They're taking pain medications. And, for me, the question of being able to do more work around pain and synthesis of pain, it's, I'll bring up ketamine here, which people are calling a psychedelic. And I know in large doses, it can be a psychedelic, but in my clinic, in my research clinic and at University of New England, we use ketamine to basically anesthetize and become disassociative with what was going on. And, there's so many different drugs being classified now as psychedelics with very different mechanisms of how they work. But because ketamine is legal, patients are getting injected and being charged a lot of money. There's a lot of ethics issues around these things. So, I think that for me, those are the bigger questions, is how do we integrate, I see psilocybin therapy as less damaging than ketamine and more effective and better research. There's clear clinical research that psilocybin is good for treatment-resistant depression and cluster headaches. There's so many benefits to it and very little harm. And yet that work has not been done with ketamine. And we're injecting it in human patients with an expected outcome and opening up massive clinics where really our licensing should be enough as healthcare practitioners or researchers to be able to qualify patients, and medical doctors being able to access these medicines and prescribe what they think is best for their patients based on clinical research. So yeah, I know there's so much to unpack, but these conversations, it's so exciting to be able to have these conversations and discuss these things.
Yeah, thank you so much, Susan. And I agree with you that access is key. In my vision, if, decrim happens in the way that it has happened in the United States, where the sharing and growing aspect of it is municipally controlled and communities know how to heal themselves, I envision getting exemptions for centers where you could have 50 to 75 people going into, it doesn't have to be a macro dose of psilocybin, a microdose of psilocybin, but together, similar to the ayahuasca experiences, but because the energies are way more sensitive now, people can drop in a lot. I see it with my clients, they drop in a lot faster with less dosage, which is actually what we want sustainably. And have maybe 20 facilitators to come together in collective, because this is what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to do this work on the collective side. But with COVID and things around that, can we do it online? Can we do it in different forms? can we empower people to do it themselves through dropping in and all of the safety measures around that? So I'm with you around the empowerment piece, and I'll pass it over to Sarah to share in regards to that as well.
Yeah, I think you know, we say sex and gender, and sometimes we like mix these things up, but gender is even a more complex issue, right? That involves our personal embodiment and how we feel in our bodies, as well as social constructs. And I mean, I'm very openly queer, and for me, and at least there's a lot of anecdotal evidence out there that it's psychedelics can be very helpful in finding the fluidity and understanding that fluidity and seeing all the different parts that we have inside of us, and making friends between them. And that's something that I'm personally also very excited about for the future as we explore these substances in a safe and responsible and scientifically based, knowledge-based data gathering way. We can actually start sieving through all these memes that we've gotten throughout the generations, all the trauma that we're carrying in us, all the biases that are absolutely not helping us on a personal level, not helping us on a society level. So for me, I really feel that this is a part of a revolution that we're creating, and a possibility to find a system, both internally and externally, that works in much more coherent way, in a much more harmonic way. And that's what excites me about this future.
Beautiful, Sarah. And I know Danielle is here. I think we're at time, but I just want to acknowledge the harmony and acceptance internally, externally, and the whole spectrum that you brought forward with that comment. Really, really appreciate that. Danielle, are we able to take a little bit more time, or are we at time?
Unfortunately, we're at time, but this is such a great conversation. I feel so bad cutting you guys off, but we've got to get moving into networking.
Thank you so much. We all learned a lot. I have so many notes I took. All the speakers were just so smart, and we feel really blessed that you all joined us for this dialogue today. It's the first of many, more to come. And we will have recordings, so we'll send those out after. The hashtags, hashtag Canndora Connect, like you see in Danielle's video. So that's an easy way to connect with people, especially on Twitter or Instagram. And we're a little bit over time, so we want to be respectful of that. So we'll say goodbye now. And thank you, everyone. Thank you, Wake. Thank you, Red Light Holland, and all of our media and community sponsors. We couldn't have done this without you. So bye, everyone.
Thanks so much for putting us on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Congratulations.
Thank
Bye.
you.